Hello and welcome to Team PokeMart, your one-stop shop for the things that you need to stop and or shop for. And today it just so happens to be Remember Things About How Pokemon Used to Be Day. What's that, value customer? You thought that holiday was last week? Well, you'd be correct, but you failed to realize that here in Kanto, every day is Remember Things About How Pokemon Used to Be Day. Because in a world crowded with Stunky, Buzzwole, and Slurpuff? What the hell is a Slurpuff? But someone needs to remember a time when Pokemon was as simple as sticking two magnets on a ball and saying go. And so we are going to be continuing our nostalgic celebrations here today by doing the opposite of the thing that we already did, which is now to look at the top 10 best sprites from Generation 1, which to be clear encompasses the green and red and blue, and yellow incarnations of the games. And just as a reminder, if you have not watched our video on the top 10 worst Generation 1 sprites, then well, lucky you. Your eyes have been saved a great deal of trauma, but feel free to check it out if you're in any way inclined. And also feel free to subscribe to Team PokeMart to keep updated on all of our new stock and to keep me in a job, because I have a monthly subscriber quota to meet and I've been far behind on that for the past, several years. Upper management says I'm on thin ice, which I find strange because I'm quite clearly on the floor of Team PokeMart, and it is not ice, at least not to my knowledge. But let's start the talking about the relevant things now, and in number 10 we have Poliwrath from Pokemon Yellow. We begin today with a truly magnificent beast being the Poliwrath seen here in its most common state, which is heavily agitated and ready to uppercut a whole series of valued customers. It's a fantastic sprite because it delivers on a word that I'm probably going to use a fair bit throughout this video, which is dynamic. This Poliwrath is dynamic, meaning in this case that it displays a great deal of activity. And just for some comparison, here is the Poliwrath from green and red, and this is not dynamic. This is a flat frog thing standing, huffing and puffing, and it's just as confused as to what it is and what it's doing as everyone viewing it. Meanwhile, Poliwrath from Pokemon Yellow is confident, having found a sense of self and a grand purpose in life. That purpose, once again, being to uppercut anything and everything. And you know what's a nice touch? You can also see the very moment that it decided to dedicate its life to uppercutting with Poliwell's yellow sprite. Just look at it, raising its fist high in the air and dreaming one day of becoming a fully fledged punch frog. Good stuff. Number 9, Mew from Red and Blue. And this is not quite Mew as we know it, but it is still an absurdly aesthetically appealing sprite. Perfectly balanced as all things should be, with a head roughly the same size as its own body, but feet long enough to provide it with a solid grounding. Oh, and also a funky tail that curves around everything and actually gives the illusion that Mew is quite small because the tail stretches to above its head. I have to admit though, the reason why I may love this sprite so much could very well have to do with how much I dislike the green and red version of Hunchback Mew, because let's be real, the only place this thing belongs is in a bell tower in 15th century France. But the strange thing is that Pokemon Yellow also didn't do the greatest job with Mew either, and in an attempt to create the aforementioned dynamic effect, they basically made Mew look like a child whose chair was removed before it sat down, resulting in a mean yet hilarious Poke prank. So no, Yellow certainly didn't do everything right, but it did certainly benefit number 8, which is Hitmonlee from Pokemon Yellow. And this is simply beautiful. It's like a frame-perfect captured shot of Hitmonlee in action, assumedly about to kick some sort of lame Hitmonchan. Ugh, Hitmonchan. Just saying it makes me feel dirty. But what this sprite does right is highlight one exceptional feature of a Hitmonlee, which is dem legs. Something the previous sprites have had quite a lot of trouble with actually. Looking back on Red and Blue, yeah, the action is there, but you really don't get a great sense of leg length or impact. Meanwhile, in Green and Red, you don't really get a sense of anything. It's more like a confused alien learning to walk for the first time. And actually, these sprites present a rather inspiring journey to glory. Starting with Green and Red, Hitmonlee has casually decided to take up kickboxing as a hobby, and this shot is from his first lesson, and he sucks at it. Cut to 1 year later in Red and Blue, and what's this? Hitmonlee can actually kick without losing his balance now. Good on him. But then we jump 5 years into the future, with Yellow's Hitmonlee now being a martial arts master. And that's what I want from my Hitmonlee, not baby's first taekwondo lesson. Number 7, Slowbro from Green and Red. What? Green and Red? That's crazy. That's like the first set of games. What can I say though? Slowbro was one of the rare Pokemon that Game Freak got right from the get-go. I mean, it's really hard to comment too much on the sprite because like many Green and Red creations, it is a bit flat, but it is still a nice chonky Slowbro. And this is something that the next two incarnations strayed from quite a bit. In Red and Blue, the decision was made to have Slowbro nom his own shell tail, and in Yellow, a decision was made to give Slowbro a proctology exam. So you know what? The Green and Red sprite seems pretty amazing in comparison, so I'll take it. Now, in the opposite sort of scenario, we have number 6, Gastly from Pokemon Yellow. And value customer, Now, you might be asking yourself, what's so special about this here Gastly? A fair question, but the very fact that your simple mind felt the need to ask it very much goes on to prove my point. This is a plain and perfect visualization of the Gas Boy, something that prior games had very much failed to achieve. Examining the Gastly of green and red as well as red and blue leaves us confronted with this sandy vapor effect, which makes me immediately uncomfortable because I hate sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. So that's not what I want from a Gastly. What I want is a spooky ghost gas, and yellow delivers on that very simplistic value proposition. And as a seasoned retail specialist, you can trust that I have a good eye for value. Valued customers, wink. But breaking the top 5 now, we have number 5, which makes sense, but it's an Onix from red and blue. But why is it Onix from red and blue? That would be because he is perfect. This is how a rock snake should be treated in visual form, taking advantage of that long, boulderific body and putting it in a nice sort of spirally thing. And Onix sprites are probably one of my biggest gripes in Pokemon because I am a very, very petty man, and I don't understand why it's so hard to make this thing look good. Like, go one game forward in Pokemon Yellow and what is this thing? It looks like an arrogant, aristocratic Onix. Give it a top hat, a monocle, and make it go ho 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 ho, and that's what this is. Then go to green and red where we find ourselves with old man Onix who looks like he needs a walking stick because it has chronic back problems. Now turn back to the wonder of red and blue to find this fearsome rock swirl staring you dead in your soon-to-be dead customer eyes. For lack of a better term, it's just such a solid design. And when it comes to rocks, I enjoy solidity. It's basic, but it works. And we have a very similar example to that with number 4, Clefable from green and red. Another Pokemon that was ready to go right out of the box. And I must emphasize that green and red did a lot, and I mean a lot of things wrong. There were Pokemon like Ekans, Wigglytuff, and even Gengar that all needed a huge amount of attention dedicated to them just to get them into passable monsters for future games. But this Clefable looks like an official image that you could still see in any new media to this day. It is a delightful looking puff, and it even has a hint of dynamism and perspective, which is achieved simply by raising that single foot. Something that red and blue attempted to recreate, but it just feels a bit off. And whilst yellow does admittedly have what is probably the most adorable Clefable sprite of Generation 1, green and red delivers a shot of quintessential Clefable. And with this sort of sprite in mind, I'm beginning to see why Clefairy was originally considered to be the primary face of Pokemon before inevitably switching to Pikachu. But what I will say is that neither of them look anywhere near as comfortable as number 3, which is Snorlax from red and blue. Huh, what a comfy boy. I really enjoy Snorlax because it's one of the few sprites prior to yellow that really tried to take advantage of some perspective, and as a result it makes Snorlax feel a lot bigger because he takes up a lot of depth as well as width. And this is something that his original sprite certainly did not achieve. Snorlax from green and red was a very wide existence, but that's all there was to him. Otherwise he felt completely flat, quite literally as well, because he looks very, very squished. And in my professional retail opinion, yellow made a big mistake by readopting the sprite, albeit shown from a different and better angle. It's still really meh though. And I get that it's hard to make a creature whose entire motif is to be asleep visually striking, but red and blue did it. Here, Snorlax is both stylish and asleep, and it's quite probably my favorite Snorlax sprite in Pokemon history, really, although there is something kind of adorable about him rolling around in Emerald, to be fair. But moving close to the top, we have number 2, Nidoking from Pokemon Yellow. And all of these word things that I've mentioned in this video, like perspective, dynamic, action, they are all encapsulated within this single Nidoking sprite. And I think it's very impressive that they were able to make Nidoking look so fearsome with a shot that essentially looks down on it. Usually you'd want a perspective from below to create that kind of effect, but Nidoking is just amazing. And to emphasize just how difficult this is to pull off, let's take a very similar sprite from Pokemon Yellow, being Blastoise. This was clearly created with the exact same idea in mind, only it failed horrendously, I might add, and instead Blastoise just looks like he's doing a little dance. Nidoking looks ready for action. Blastoise looks ready for Kabuki Theater. And I should say that Nidoking sprites have been solid all throughout Generation 1. You can really tell that a lot of care has been placed on him, which culminated in the sheer glory that is yellow. And speaking of sheer glory, we should move on to our peak contender, which is number 1, Golbat from red and blue. No, I am not joking. This is certainly not the Golbat we know, but I would argue that it's even better than the Golbat we know. It just has such character with its sly eyes and ridiculous tongue. Seeing this thing for the first time was a real shock to the system, system, and it made me actually want to use Golbat, whereas previously I didn't really care for it. Golbat was cool and all, but with this guy, cool does not even begin to sum it up. There is no way that a human would be capable of reaching red and blue Golbat levels of suave, and it does sadden me that they moved away from this in yellow to the more traditional Golbat, who still looks like he's having fun. Definitely not quite as much fun though. There is no sprite in any incarnation of Generation 1 that even comes close to the character presented in Golbat, and that is why he is undoubtedly the best Generation 1 sprite. And there you go, a highly opinionated list for all of you valued customers to digest and inevitably argue with. But please do make sure to stop by Team PokeMart and say hi, which you can do in the comments below. And if you're interested in some of our other merchandise, then please do click these tantalizing links over here, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for regular updates on our new stock. But for now, this has been Team PokeMart, and we'll see you next time.